I'm also starting the recording right now, so everyone will have it. So Mary will start with an introduction. And Mary, do you need the screen?
I do.
Okay, I'm giving that to you right now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start with just a little bit of background information on the CoC program itself. And so just kind of to set the tone for today and the context in which we're operating. So the purposes of HUD's Continuum of Care program, or CoC program, which is the pool of funding we're all talking about applying for, are to promote the community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. So community-wide commitment, we want involvement from as many entities as possible. Provide funding for efforts to quickly rehouse individuals and families while minimizing the trauma and dislocation of being in a homeless situation. Promoting access to and effective utilization of mainstream programs. Those are programs that are not only serving people experiencing homelessness, but other people as well. And then optimizing self-sufficiency for individuals and families. HUD's homeless policy and program priorities are probably sound very familiar to you. Strategic resource allocation, ending chronic homelessness, family homelessness, youth homelessness, and veteran homelessness, and then using a housing first approach. Part of the requirements of a continuum of care, as spelled out in 24 CFR Part 578, the CoC interim rule, which I know all of you have memorized, is to prepare an application for funds, specifically for continuum of care program funds, which is what we're talking about today. So according to 578.9, the continuum must design, operate, and follow a collaborative process for the development of applications and approve the submission of applications. The CoC must also establish priorities for funding projects in the geographic area. Both of those things we have done. Another requirement is if more than one application will be submitted, the CoC must designate an eligible applicant to be the collaborative applicant that will collect and combine the required application information from all the applicants and for all the projects within the area. And then the collaborative applicant will also apply for CoC planning activities. And in our CoC, PHN has been chosen as the collaborative applicant. So that means PHN will submit what's called the consolidated application for the CoC program fund. And there are three parts to the consolidated application. The CoC application, which is representing the entire CoC. Project applications, which are all the applications for projects that are permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, and SSO projects. There are also the project applications for HMIS and for CoC planning funds. And third is what's called the CoC priority listing, and that's where the CoC tells HUD what the ranking order of the individual projects is. So all of those things are required, and PHN is on top of it with the CoC. And here's a diagram. I know it's tiny here, but we'll post it on the website, and you can see it a lot larger. This kind of explains the overall application process. So during the summer, you'll see the overall process was that we were revising the RFP, thinking it might come out soon, the NOFA might come out soon, while you all were evaluating your project or designing a new project. Then this month, we got the NOFA the other day, and so we're creating training materials, and we're having a webinar. You guys are reading everything. By October 20th, the applicants will submit their applications to PHN. During October and late October and early November, The independent review team will be reviewing all the applications and scoring them and ranking projects. And then by November 19th, we at THN will submit the entire consolidated application, and that includes you all hitting the submit button in your project application in email. So we want you to know we are here to help you, and we're excited that you joined us for this first training on the 2015 CoC project application process.
Thank you very much, Mary. So now we are going to give you an overview of the request for proposals. Is that something you all need the screen for, Mary and Caitlin?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just leave the screen with you then and hand it back over to you.
Perfect. So my name is Caitlin, and I am the Balance of State Program Coordinator, and I'm going to go over the request for proposals for our local continuum of care process. So that way you guys can get a better idea of what's going to be required of you as you're going through this CoC project application process. So I'm going to give you a quick roadmap of the RFP. I know most of you probably read it already, but for those of you who haven't, it will help you sort of locate where the information that you need is within the RFP. There's an allergy going around here. All right. So the first section of the RFP is about where or how to use funding. So we have renewal projects, which is pretty standard, and this year we have an opportunity for new projects, which can be created through two different means. You can voluntarily reallocate funds, and there is also a permanent housing bonus project that is available this year. I think Mary and Eric will be covering a little bit later. But I just want to let you guys know that is where it is. Oh, I can use Mary has a Let's see. So the next part of the RFP is about eligible persons to be served. Again, most of you are probably familiar with what this all is, but in case you need to know where your reference material is to back you up, this is a great place to find it during this second part of the RFP. The next part is about threshold requirements, which I'm not going to cover right now because Mary will be covering that a little bit later, but I wanted to let you know it is located here in RFP, our threshold requirements, our ranking requirements. We want to make sure that the process is as transparent as possible.
I'm sorry, Caitlin, I need to. Yeah. I'm sorry. I think you all might want to try your headphone mics. Can you not hear us well? It's not coming through very well.
Okay. So Mary's going to go and get her headshot.
Okay. So thank you all for the feedback on that. Yeah, and you might even want to, and I'm sorry to ask you this, but you might even want to start over.
Okay, so, that is fine with me.
Yeah, and if there are problems, you know, when she starts using the mic, we'll fix it one way or another, even if we have to huddle around one computer.
All right, is this a little bit better?
That is excellent.
All right, well, I will start over. I apologize for the technical difficulties here. So I'm going to give everyone a quick roadmap of our local application process for the CoC and our request for proposals. So this first part is an introduction, just introducing what the CoC program is. I'm assuming most of you already know. And then this next part is about what kind of funding is available this year for the different projects. So we have renewal projects as usual, and then we also have opportunities for new projects this year, and you can have, there's two different ways to get into a new project. You can voluntarily reallocate existing project funding. So if you had a transitional housing project you would like to reallocate into a permanent supportive housing project, then that would be allowed this year. And there's also a new permanent housing bonus, which Mary and Eric will be covering later in the webinar. But I did want to let you guys know that that was something that was happening this year. The next part of the RFP is addressing eligible persons to be served. Again, I'm guessing most of you are fairly familiar with this, but if not, this is where it's located. You can always double check what those requirements are. And the next part of our RFP deals with threshold requirements. This is our internal reviewing process for all of your project applications. So Mary is going to be talking about this a little bit later, so I don't want to, are you Mary? Yes, maybe. Someone will be talking, it's either Mary or Eric is going to be talking about our sort of internal review process for the project applications a little bit later in the webinar. But we want to make sure that this process is as transparent as possible, so we've put everything in writing so that way you guys can review it and know what's going on with your project applications once you submit them to us. So now we're on page 5 of the RFP, and this page is going to become your best friend as time goes on because this has the all-important project application deadline and timeline information. I'm going to go over it with you guys just real fast. I'm sure you've all read it, but if you haven't, I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page about when things are due and what it is that we're doing with your project applications. So the next deadline coming up is on October the 20th, and that is when your project applications are due to THN, and we are accepting those by electronic submission, and we'll go over a little bit more about how to get those into us and what format that we would like them in just a moment. So that will be due on the 20th.
Okay,
Yes, Eric.
let me just interject. So yes, everyone, it is now the 20th. It was the 16th when we originally sent it out. We have changed it and given you a few more days. I know it's not much, but we've given you a few more days. So it is the 20th, and we'll be putting out emails. We'll make sure, we'll shout it from the rooftops. We'll make sure everyone knows. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, and I think those extra 4 days will definitely give people a little bit more breathing room in this application process, and we'll try to get that out to as many people as we possibly can, because I know originally it was the 16th, I believe. So once you turn those into us, 3 days later we will be beginning the application, or we'll be completing the application threshold review. So that's that page before, and I'm sure we'll go through it with you. And then 3 days after that, we will have some corrections for you guys, and we will let's see, proposals with corrections. So we'll have corrections that we'll send out on the 23rd, and then 3 days later they will be due back to us. So it's important to note that while we can catch a lot of things that might need corrections in your project applications, that you also kind of look through them over again with a fine-tooth comb, because we are fallible human beings, but we will try to catch as many things as we can and help you guys make sure your project applications look the best that they can look. Then on the 27th, the day after you return your proposals with corrections in them, we will advise you by email if your program meets HUD eligibility requirements and whether or not we will be submitting it with our consolidated application. That very same day, we will also send your applications to our grant review subcommittee, or our internal review team. They'll be going over your project applications and making sure that they're complying with everything they need to comply with, all that jazz. And then we will also let you know of ranking results. So I believe Mary and Eric will be going over how we're ranking projects this year and what that's going to look like, and you will be advised of what your ranking result was. And then 3 days later, you'll see on 11/6, let me see if I can grab this thing. On November 6th, we will be also posting that priority listing to the website, so that will be made public for everyone to know what their listing is. On the 13th of November, we'll be reviewing the consolidated application with the Balance of State CoC board, making sure all of our I's are dotted, T's are crossed, so that way we can submit by the 19th of November. And something like that, even though HUD says it's complete, we're going to try and get it in on the 19th because there are 3 extra bonus points available for turning it in early. We'd like to try and get our CoC application points to the fullest extent possible. So everyone staying on top of these previous deadlines is really going to help us be able to turn that in early and get those 3 extra bonus points. Will boost us up to the top. And then this next page is about technical assistance. So I know Eric will have some technical assistance slots that are going to be available to help you with your project applications. Should you have any questions or should you get second steps? This part is about program components, and most of you should be fairly familiar with what's going into your projects, but if not, we've also made that information available here. All right, match and leveraging are our next topics. Mary will be covering action, leveraging, documentation, and what that should look like, but we've also included in the RFP some examples of what that looks like, I believe, way down here, leveraging documentation requirements. That is on page 9. But I did skip over something rather important up here on page 8. Your application packet. So these two sections, the renewal application packet and the new application packet, depending on if your program is renewal or new, are listed here. So everything you need to turn in is under these bullet points depending on what type of application that you have. I've also made some checklists for you guys so that way you can have it sitting on your desk, make sure you've got everything in order. That I'll be showing to you guys at the end of today when we go over resources. But most of your documentation is going to be coming out of eSnaps, which Eric will be assisting you all with here later today, and then I believe there may be a second webinar where we walk through eSnaps with you guys, so don't panic.
All right, great. Thank you, Caitlin. I hope everyone got that. I know that we've had some audio issues, but hopefully that headset corrected everything. So let me just go ahead and hand it off to Mary. Mary has the next section about the new project applications.
All right, well, I'm going to take my headset off, so I apologize for any rustling you're about to hear.
And y'all, I will take some time between their two presentations to ask if you have any questions. I do know that there was one hand raised, and that was Miss Halford and Texarkana. And it looks like Adria, you need to use your audio pin so you can speak, because I can't unmute you right now. But there was a question that came in. And actually, it's regarding the locks data, and I'm going to go over that a little later. So I will answer that at that time. I hope that's okay. Alina, are there any other questions before I hand it off to Mary for the new project application? Okay, looks like it's good. Go ahead.
All right. I've pulled up the new application for new projects. I will tell you, actually, maybe let me start with HUD's application. This is their application for new projects, detailed instructions. You'll see right here the title, Detailed Instructions. Those were just released this morning, or perhaps after 7 p.m. last night. I'm not sure. But the last time I looked last night, they were not yet released. So I have not fully updated our CoC's new project application because of that. I have just begun to do that, but we didn't want to post anything quite yet until we've all had a chance to read these detailed instructions. So that being said, the new project application that's currently on our website will be being updated. I've only gotten as far as updating the first page, which is what I'm going to show you now. And we've tried to pick out the top 5 things that you would need to know if you are wanting to apply as a new project. So you'll see, of course, the funding is somewhat limited, but there are 2 ways that new projects may be funded through this year's competition. Caitlin mentioned, and here we're repeating, through reallocation, and that is where funds are voluntarily reallocated from an existing project to be able to fund a new project. Those kinds of projects that are eligible to have that reallocated funding are new permanent supportive housing projects where all beds will be dedicated for use by chronically homeless individuals and families as defined in 24 CFR 578.3, or new rapid rehousing projects for homeless families coming from the streets or emergency shelter, youth up to age 24, and persons who meet the criteria of paragraph 4 of the definition of homeless. In short, that's people fleeing domestic violence, among others. And then third, for reallocation, there's an opportunity to create a new supportive services only, or SSO, project for centralized or coordinated assessment systems. And here in the Balance of State CoC, we call that coordinated access. So those are the only three kinds of projects, new projects, that can be created through the process of reallocation. We are not aware that any of our current projects are in fact planning to reallocate their funds. I believe that's the case. And so there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for other groups to get in on that method. However, there's another method this year, permanent housing bonus. In prior years, HUD has made some bonus funding available, but it's been only for permanent supportive housing. We just learned about this change last Friday, though, when the NOFA was released. This year, there are two kinds of projects that can be funded under the permanent housing bonus. First one, new permanent supportive housing projects that will serve 100% chronically homeless families or individuals, or new rapid rehousing projects that will serve homeless individuals and families coming directly from the streets or emergency shelters, and includes persons fleeing domestic violence situations and other persons meeting the criteria of paragraph 4. So that was something we have not been talking to you about over the past few months because we didn't know that was going to be a possibility, but it's an exciting possibility because this is the first time in recent years that HUD has made any significant amount of funding available for new projects. And so we just want to be clear that it can be a new permanent supportive housing project for chronically homeless people, or a new rapid rehousing project for homeless individuals and families coming directly who meet the definition of homeless. They're coming directly from emergency shelters or streets. They're fleeing domestic violence. So those are the two ways that projects can be funded: reallocation or permanent housing bonus. And HUD is now calling that permanent housing dash permanent supportive housing, or PSH, and permanent housing dash rapid rehousing, or RRH. So they're really stressing that permanency of permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. All right, the other top 3 points to know: new projects are created through allocation or through the permanent housing bonus will be scored and ranked in the same process as renewal projects. COCs may submit more than one application for new projects, so not just one. So we're hoping that a number of folks, especially with this new opportunity for rapid rehousing, will be at a point in their communities where they could apply for some additional funding or new funding. And then we wanted to point out the new options with grant terms for new projects, and that's from pages 22 and 23 of HUD's NOFA. New projects requesting tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA, may request 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-year grant terms. That's different from the past, where new projects were limited to requesting 1-year grant terms. New projects requesting leasing may request 1, 2, or 3-year grant terms. New projects requesting project-based rental assistance, or PBRA, or SBRA, which sponsor-based rental assistance, or operating costs, may request up to a 15-year grant term. However, they may request only up to 5 years of funding. So it would be a 15-year award, but you're only able to request up to the first 5 years of funds. New projects that request operating costs, SSO, HMIS, and project administration costs may request 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-year grant terms with funding for the same number of years. And then finally, this is the only one that relates to renewal projects, but I put it in here anyway. Any renewal permanent housing project that receives project-based rental assistance or operating costs may request up to a 15-year grant term. However, they may only request 1 year of funding. So those are some very specific grant terms that we wanted to point out to you because that might open up some more options for your project or within your community. And again, this application is, the rest of it is the one that's currently on our website, but we are going to be updating that based on the information that HUD released this morning. I will tell you in general what we're looking at, and if you've already started filling this out, that's great, because what a quick review showed is that most of the information that we have from our 2014 application, which is this one, is in fact identical to what HUD is asking for in new project applications this year. There are a few differences, however. Let's see, I'll just scroll through a little bit of what I was seeing. When we get to this question 7, project description. Question A is the same, but just so you know, there are going to be a lot more questions within this section asking about some of HUD's newer concepts that they're emphasizing in terms of which subpopulations you're working with, whether or not you are using housing first, and if so, how and to what extent. Are you going to be doing permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing? This is the part of the application where you will be able to distinguish which type of new project you're applying for. And if you're requesting rental assistance money, and whether you're using a particular structure for the housing. So a lot of questions that we're going to need to be adding into this project description section. The ones that are still there are applicable, but we need to add some. And then for Section 8, supportive services, there are a few additional questions HUD has added related to HMIS, and a little bit of a different way that they're asking for the breakdown of supportive services. That's slightly different from how they did it last year that we'll need to update. The populations to be served, those charts looked very similar, although I haven't looked at them word by word, but just know that that's a topic you'll also be discussing. Subpopulations in terms of households, HUD has this matrix for us where they're very descriptive about every cell has a row and a column heading that you need to be aware of. So for example, for any disabled adults over age 24 who are also chronically homeless veterans, this is the cell where you would write the number that you're planning to serve. That just tends to be one of the trickier parts of these applications. You'll see HUD is also still asking us about outreach. And then on performance measures, this section actually will change somewhat, section 15. HUD has an entirely separate set of instructions for how to fill out the performance measurement section of their application. And Caitlin will show that to you later in the resources. Similarly, HUD has a completely different set of instructions for how to fill out the budgets within the project applications. And again, Caitlin will show you that when we show you the resources. Then you will be talking some about match, and there's your budget detail, a little bit about leverage, and that's it. So again, a lot of what we have in this application from last year is still going to be very usable in the 2015 application. We just need to go in and add some questions based on what HUD released this morning. So I believe that's it on the presentation. Does anyone have questions on the new project application?
And I'm going to open up the mics for that. Just we'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to point out one thing that, well, you've already pointed out, but I want to emphasize it. The really good thing about entering your information into this format is that you can use your Word document, you can use your Word program to enter everything in, and you can copy and paste from it into eSnaps. And when you get to sections that have a limit on characters, that is much easier to do in Word than it is in eSnaps. So because you can do your word count, which will show your number of characters, before you even try to put it in eSnaps and get frustrated. So it will be useful for that purpose, I believe. Putting your information in initially and then moving it over to eSnaps. So I am going to go ahead and try. I'm going to open up the mic so everyone's mic will be open. So if you don't want your mic opened, mute yourself on your side. And I'm going to ask if there are any questions. So I'm starting to go down the list. Again, you are unmuted. And we might hear a little feedback. Oh, just text. All right, well, this may not work. Let's see. You know what, I'm sorry. That's not going to work. We're getting too much feedback. If you want to ask a question, please type it in or raise your hand, and I will unmute you. And so Adra has raised her hand. I just want to make sure you don't have any other questions. Adra Halford is with the City of Texarkana, and they have a rapid rehousing project that they are applying. It's a renewal project. So do you have any other questions, Adra, or did Mary answer those throughout her presentation?
You know, can you hear me, Eric?
Sure.
Okay, good. And I'm not creating any of that feedback for everyone?
You are not.
Okay, terrific. Okay, you know, I am thinking of questions as we go along, and, you know, things like generating points in within the application. So have they, you know, I understand that there's still additional points available for the permanent housing, for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. I'm wondering, like, with us having done a reallocation this year, I think that we would be a renewal project now.
You would be.
And I'm wondering, yeah, so are we still able to generate those additional points with being a renewal?
So the section that I'm going to go over next, I believe will answer your questions in regard to that. And hopefully a lot of your other questions or other questions from people on the call.
Okay. My apologies then for jumping ahead.
No, we want input. We want input. So you all raise your hands, and so I can do the same with you, just like I did with Ms. Halford here. Or type in your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you. Yeah, of course. I'll mute you back, and if anyone else has a question, please let me know. I'm continually scanning the list of attendees to see if anyone's raised their hand. But if I do miss you, please be patient with me. I will get to you eventually. One more thing before I move on and I'm going to go ahead and put the screen back to me. The 15-year term that Mary talked about, I'm sure that caught a lot of ears. One thing that you need to look at if you're thinking about that is whether or not you are one of those programs that can apply for that. Just off the top of my head, I think there may be only one project, and I'm probably wrong on this, but just off the top of my head, I can only think of one project that would be eligible to apply for that, and that's Gulf Coast Center in Galveston. Their tenant-based rental assistance, I believe. Actually, I don't know if even they can. So we need to look at the rules for that real closely before you go ahead and expect to do that. Just so everyone knows, we're going to have another training that will be focused on going into eSnaps and filling out your project applications. and that will also be recorded. And hopefully that will be next week as early as possible. Okay, let me go ahead and get to the renewal. Here we go. So I'm going to go over the renewal continuum of care project application evaluation process. That is a mouthful. Okay, so everyone should be seeing the evaluation form here and instructions. So just a quick introduction about this. This is a form we've used for the past, I think, 3 competitions, or this may be the 3rd competition in which we've used this form and process. And the process is really the important part and what we're really using. So this section in the beginning, this just gives you a little bit of the history. And the important thing to note with the creation of this form and this process is that it was done in conjunction with CoC members. So folks throughout the Texas Balance of State Continuum of Care helped form this, helped create this process. And we really focused on getting input from those that receive Continuum of Care program funding. So, and it's been updated every year, slightly been updated, and it was updated earlier this year, I believe this spring. It looks like, yeah, May. So this is a document that we're trying to keep up to date with what HUD's standards are and what our CoC wants. So this is actually, there's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of scoring explanations later on in this document, but ultimately this is a very simple evaluation process. We're just looking at 3 categories. When we, as a CoC, look at our project applicants, we're focused on 3 things and whether or not they do those things well. Number 1 is the project participant impact. What we're really looking for is what's the impact of the project in the community? And is it meeting that community's goals and our CoC's goals? So that's that. The first part, the first category is project participant impact. And we look at statistics that elicit that information, and that helps us to score that section. The second major category that we're looking at when we're evaluating project applicants is whether or not it is meeting the community need. And really, the title of this is a little misleading, but because it's very similar to the first category. But on this one, we're really focusing on whether or not those projects are utilizing the beds and the units they have, the services they have to serve those that are the hardest to serve. So we're looking at their utilization rates, and we're looking at what population these projects serve. A lot of our HUD Continuum of Care program projects should be focused on serving that hardest to serve population, so that other projects in the community can serve that population that's a little easier to serve, and hopefully will exit homelessness with a little less intervention than these projects provide. And then finally, the third category that we evaluate programs on is project capacity. And this is a big one. We're looking at if the applicant has the capacity to operate the project and to operate it effectively. So we are looking at things about, we're looking at whether or not the project applicants have met their reporting requirements, whether or not they're spending their funds. And that's an important one, because if the data show that the project is not spending all of their funds on an annual basis over the course of 2 or 3 years, then we need to look at whether or not that program actually needs those funds. And we need to make that decision before HUD makes it for us. We look at the HMIS data quality. Obviously, for projects that serve domestic violence, that is not going to be something that's factored in. We look at the leverage documentation. So when you as project applicants submit your application, you have to have all of your match and leverage documentation ready and copies of those that documentation sent to us at the time of application and the time we submit it to HUD. So we look at that, and we're really looking at those that go above and beyond. So those that are able to get a large amount of leverage or obtain a large amount of leverage will receive some bonus points for that. And of course, we look at the audit and monitoring findings. If HUD is having trouble with your program, then obviously we want to know, and we want to know that you are fixing or resolving the issues that they have brought up. So those are the three major categories that we look at when we're evaluating the program. And I shouldn't say we as in Texas Homeless Network. The CoC is looking at these categories and looking at the data within these categories, and specifically the independent review team, which is made up of members of the CoC and members from the state level and other experts from around the nation. So it's not THN that is making these decisions. Okay, the data that we use within these categories, that we look at within these categories, most of that data comes from your annual performance reports. The majority of that does come from those reports. So that is something you will be sending in as part of your application package. That is used, and then we also look at HUD monitoring, audit and monitoring findings. We look at your LOCS data, and LOCS is line of credit control system data. So basically what we're doing is we're looking at your rate of expenditure, rate of grant expenditure for the past 3 project years. Then we'll factor in information for, I think it's just one scoring item, but we'll look at whether or not you participated in the most recent point in time count and the housing inventory update. And I can't think of any agency within our, at least within our renewal group, that has not done that. So everyone should receive points for that. Obviously, if we had someone who refused to participate, that person would not receive points. And then, of course, we will need the information about the project leverage. So we'll need those letters. And in the application that you submit and you prepare in eSnaps, that information is provided. Sorry, I had a... Okay, here we go. So you can read a little bit more about the scoring in Appendix B. I would suggest that if you are a renewal applicant, you go in there and you look at all of the data elements that we'll be looking at, so you have an idea of where you'll score. I will go over it just briefly in a second, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that today. The other important thing I think to take away from this this process and this document, and the other important thing to impart to you, is the prioritization process that we have. And this is something that we started using a few years ago, the CoC, again. The CoC membership looked at this, we worked on this, and we voted on this prioritization process. And this process, and this, basically this prioritization is more or less matching up with HUD's. What we started doing is looking at how HUD was setting their priorities and how they were awarding funding, not only within our CoC, but other CoCs. And obviously what we noticed is that they are focusing on those permanent housing projects, and those that are in renewal or those that are new through reallocation or new through a bonus. So they're putting those higher up on the priority list, higher up near number 1. And they're putting the projects that have less emphasis on housing down towards the bottom. So we use the prioritization order that they use, and it starts with renewal, permanent housing, and that includes permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. Next would be new reallocated permanent supportive housing. Then third is new reallocated rapid rehousing. Then you have transitional housing. Number 5 on the list would be a UFA, and that's Unified Funding Agency is what that stands for. That's just not applicable in our CoC. Then you can see the rest of the order, the new reallocated SSO projects for coordinated access, which we would love to have if someone does choose to reallocate a project and apply for that. Then HMIS falls in there, and then all other supportive service only projects. And this is the prioritization process we use when we're looking at the tiering process, the tier 1 and tier 2 categories. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. I'm going to show you a spreadsheet that I think will help you understand how we set the tier 1 and tier 2 categories. Okay, so as you read through here, it's this just explains what I just did, and also that whatever the internal review team comes up with and whatever prioritization they present to THN and to the CoC project applicants, that's not final until the CoC board votes on it and approves it, and then we would submit it as THN would submit it as the lead applicant for the Texas Balance of State CoC to HUD. One thing that we have in here, and we really like to emphasize, is a note about projects that are considering not reapplying. There are, throughout the past few years, there have been a few projects that they've been undecided leading up to the CoC competition on whether or not they will reapply. And unfortunately, if they remain undecided for too long, it doesn't allow us, Texas Homeless Network, as a CoC lead, to work with them and other communities on reallocating that funding. And so what happens in those cases is that funding is lost. And I can tell you that that's happened in 3 different communities over the course of, I think, the last 5 years. Once that money is not applied for in renewal, then that money is gone. So if a renewal application is not made for that money, that project is lost, well, forever for that community and for the Balance of State continuum of care. So if there are any folks out there that are thinking about not applying this year, please let us know now so we can work with you to reallocate that funding, and preferably reallocate that funding in your community so we can keep those dollars serving people experiencing homelessness. Okay, this just gives you a little bit more information about what you need to turn in. I went over all of this earlier, but you need to send in your annual performance report. You need to make sure to send in your project applications, and you would download that from eSnaps after you create it in eSnaps. One note on that: don't hit submit in eSnaps. I'll show you how to download the PDF without hitting submit. If you hit submit, the process might take a little longer for us to get the application back to you if edits are required. Send in your latest HUD monitoring and audit reports, and so send in your latest ones. Now, there are project applicants out there that have never been monitored by HUD. And in those cases, what you need to do is send a letter stating that you've never been monitored by HUD on your letterhead. Now, I will say we do check with HUD on that, so Please be honest about that. And if you do have a monitoring report to send to us and it shows that there are issues or there are areas that of concern, show the documentation in which you have resolved those issues or concerns. And then finally, you have your project leverage information. You send in those just copies of the match and commitment letters, and then the LOX data. And that is something we provided a spreadsheet for you. You would enter that data into that spreadsheet that we have provided. And I will say for some of you, your projects may not be completely done yet. So your last project year that you're reporting on for LOX may not be completely full. Every month may not be completely full, or every draw may not be shown that would be shown if it were completed after the project is finished. Okay, and here are the list of renewal applicants that I have here, and there are 42 of these, and you can review them one more time. I've sent this out several times, and I believe this is all correct now. But there are 42 renewal project applicants in this year's competition, and the total amount of funding this year, the total amount that we expect you all to apply for is a little over, it's about 7.5 million. So that is considered our annual renewal demand. That's what HUD considers our annual renewal demand, or ARD. And that's an important distinction, and that number is important, and you'll see why in a little bit. Then you can see how we score. So again, I don't want to go into this in depth because we could spend an hour talking about this, but you can look at the different data elements that we look at by category. So under housing stability, you can see we have some that are dedicated to just the permanent supportive housing projects. Then you have data elements that are focused on transitional housing. And then of course you have your all programs. And what we're looking at is whether or not a project applicant meets the standard as we have it set. These standards, so for example, our standard for permanent supportive housing is that for length of stay of 6 months or longer, the standard is 83% success rate. So that standard was come to by number one, looking at HUD standards. And in a lot of cases, these are HUD standards. And number two, looking at HUD standards and then looking at how we do as a CoC and what it is we should expect for ourselves. So there are some cases where the standard is raised a little bit from the HUD standard because we expect our continuum of care to do a little bit better based on previous experience and based on input from CoC members. And in some cases, it's actually a little bit lower than the HUD standard because of the same reasons. So you can see to get the full 10 points, it has to be at the standard or higher. And if it is within this range, 75% of the standard, then the applicant gets 7.5 points, or 75% of the available points. Any questions about that? I just encourage you to look through it, and you can look through your annual performance report and get an idea of how you might score. The breakdown of these data elements, it follows. There's housing stability, of course, and then access to income and benefits, length of time homelessness. Obviously, we would like for that number to be as small as possible. And that's all for the first major category that I mentioned, the project participant impact. The next major category is meeting community need, and that is measured by these data. So we're looking at the daily bed utilization and whether or not the projects are working with the hardest to serve. Then finally, the last category is the project capacity. And so we're making sure that the projects are participating in our CoC-wide surveying efforts and updates on housing inventory, and we're looking at cost effectiveness. This is a big one, and I hate to just focus on money, and we're not focused on just money, but that is a big one, and it's a big one for HUD. Like I said before, I would rather us as a CoC make decisions on funding ourselves with our membership voting on it and our board voting on it than HUD making the decisions for us. So there is a lot of emphasis on your expenditure rates. And you can see how that is scored there. So if you're spending nearly all of your grant every year, up to 5%, then you are going to score the points you need for this section. Then we look at data quality, of course, project leverage, and like I said, we're really looking for those folks that go above and beyond and are able to obtain a large amount of project leverage. Those folks will get that extra 10 points, and that will be a big benefit to them. And then the HUD monitoring findings. So, and then you can see the breakdown of points by project. So that process will start in earnest once you submit your initial grant. But there has been some work leading up to that process or that deadline already. So we should be ready to go in scoring and prioritization of our CoC funds. Okay, real quick, any questions before I move on to, any questions before I move on to the tier discussion? Sorry, I had to take a drink. Okay, I'll move on. And I don't mean tear as in crying, but you may feel like crying after looking at all these numbers. Okay, so many of you have been doing this with us for, well, several years now. And you've heard us talk about projects that get into Tier 1 and projects that get into Tier 2. And these are categories that HUD assigns projects within our overall project application submission. So Tier 1 projects are considered, quote, safe. They are considered, and I don't want to say that they will be funded, but they're very likely to be funded. So Tier 1 projects, which in this case would include all of these projects, are considered safe and they should be funded. Those in Tier 2 are at risk of not being funded. They are not necessarily doomed to not being funded, but they are at risk of not being funded. So in years past, HUD has told us things like, expect for there to be about a 5% cut, and that's not the term that they use, but that's how I think of it. So what they say is, look at your annual renewal demand, and for this sample, we're just going to say it's 6.9 million. They say, look at that number, and then in the years past, they've said, okay, now take 5% out of that number. That 5%, whatever amount of funding that falls into that 5%, will be in that Tier 2. So the past few years, it's been 5%, 3%. It's been small percentages. This year, it's actually 15%. So this is going to be challenging this year for a lot of our folks, and it's going to make this even more competitive. So yes, it is 15%. So as we're setting our priority rankings, of course, we first of all look at the types of projects that we prioritize. But then we also have to factor in the amount of funding that is available. So our annual renewal demand, we should be able to be funded for that. This year, it's about 7.5 million. For this example, we're going to say that our annual renewal demand is 6.9 million. So everything within that category or within that number should be funded or is very likely to be funded. So I've created this spreadsheet to show you that as we rank projects and put in the amount they request, we have the total amount for which we are ranking them for. These numbers can be different in some cases. If a project says that they want a certain amount of money, but the CoC decides that they are only going to rank a lesser amount of money, these numbers can be different. In this case, we're keeping the numbers the same. Then I have a column here for the running total. So you can see the numbers start to add up. You get to 1 million, 2 million, and so on. As that number increases, so does the percentage of the annual renewal demand, which is, again, down here. Everything up to 85% should be safe, should be in that tier 1. So in this sample, we would get all the way down to the last transitional housing renewal project. And actually, we need to take planning out of there now. Well, I will leave it in there as something else. But we get down to this last transitional housing renewal project, and that's where tier 1 stops. Then everything under it would be in tier 2. Now, when we get into tier 2, we need to look at our ranking there and adjust it for HUD's priorities. This would already do so. This is a really simple example. This is what would happen if we only had renewal projects applying. What happens when you start having new projects applying is that they can jump into one of these categories. And if they do that, then we have the case of everything moving down. And say you had another project that was the exact same as this. Then everything moves down with it. Once I get the function right. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not getting it right. But I think you can see that as you add more dollars to your funding request, your running total gets higher, and therefore your percentage, as you go down the row from the number 1 project down to the last project, the percentage gets higher, so therefore that tier 1 line moves up. So I just point that out to say it's a little bit more competitive this year, and we're likely in a situation where our CoC is going to have to make some very difficult decisions. So, well, that being said, are there any questions about this? There's got to be questions about this. And ask the tough question. Or is anyone hearing me? Okay, no one's asking any questions. I will move on. Thanks for letting me know that you all are hearing me, Sheila. Okay, there is actually a question that comes in. Yes, and that is the tough question. Yes, Alina Shady from Longview, Community Health Corps in Longview, she says, I hear you, but I think we know what that means, and it means that someone might not be funded this year, and that's true. So that's the case, and that's what is preached every year. This year, I think things could be a little different because of that 15% as opposed to the smaller percent from years past. So sounds like everyone has that. If you have questions, please let me know. I'll try to put together a little bit better sample for you and send this out to you so you can see with call out boxes that explain some of this. Okay. So, we actually have a question here. You are unmuted, or you have to unmute yourself on your side, Alina. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, like, if you were to look back on last year's competition with that 15% instead of the 5%, realistically, how many projects would not have gotten funded that did get funded?
So I'm calling all of these samples, but this more or less reflects what happened last year.
Okay.
It wouldn't be quite as dire because we're not going to factor in the planning grant to it this year, but this is pretty close to what we would have seen last year. So we would have only had 3 projects in Tier 2, and one of those would have been the HMIS project that we have, and the other 2 would have been the supportive service only projects. So we would have been safe last year. I don't expect that this year. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to, you can just mute yourself on your side, and that way you can take your mute off anytime you want to speak. Okay. Let's go ahead and get to the next section. I took a long time with that section. I'm sorry about that, but I think it's important to go over that because we have a lot of renewal project applicants on the line. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the forms that are required for submission, and I will say that Caitlin has put together this handy dandy checklist for both renewal projects and new projects. And I would encourage you to use that as you're going through and putting your project applications together. So you now will be sending all of your materials to us as part of your application submission by 4:30 p.m. on October 20th. And you send that via email to txboscoc@thn.org. That email is on all the documentation. So what you will send to us, number 1, I have created a folder for a sample project. We'll call it Sampleville. Number 1 thing you'll send to us is the applicant profile for your project. Many of you probably recognize this. This is something that you create in eSnaps, and I'm going to go over how you create that in just a few minutes. But this is what the downloaded version of your eSnaps applicant profile looks like. And I'll go over the contents of that, but it's basically just your information, your administrative information for your project. Now, there are a few of you who have more than one CoC or project application, I should say. In those cases, you will download this twice. You will send this to us twice as part of each application's package. Then you'll send the project application to us. And again, that's something that you download out of eSnaps. And I will show you how to do that. Not right now, but I will very soon, but I'll show you what it looks like. Here is an example of a new project. So yours, of course, will be filled out. Mine's not completely filled out. But you'll submit that. And then, of course, you have the renewal project, which I have in here somewhere. Well, it looks about like the new project, so you have a good idea of what it will look like. You will send in your most recent APR. If you're wondering where to get that, you can also get that in eSnaps. If you don't have it already saved in your files, then it will look something similar to this. You can see everything in eSnaps follows the similar format. Make sure that you have, this obviously is not the correct operating year start date and end date. Make sure whatever you send to us has that correct one. And if you're wondering what is the correct start date and end date, send us the most recent. Send us the APR for your most recent project year completed. If you have any HUD audit or monitoring findings, you will send us that. And this is what they look like, if I can find it. There we go. And this is from our HMIS project. Yes, even HUD monitors us. So don't think we're getting out of it. One of the things you'll see is if they had a concern about something. So you're looking for that, the most recent one, and any response that you gave to HUD because of it. I strike through here because we're going to look at, we only need to cover this once. We'll go down to LOCS data, and again, LOCS stands for Line of Credit Control System. We've been using the phone to draw those funds down for years and years, but recently HUD has finally started eLOCS. So the data that we will put into this LOCS spreadsheet can come from both records from both the phone system or the eLOCS system. If you're using eLOCS, it makes it a lot easier to download this information, and especially into this format. So I don't think this is filled out. Yeah, it is actually filled out. So you can see I have the past 3 years here. And this should resemble the form that you use when you're doing your drawdown in eSnaps. And for us, we do a draw every month. So that's why it's showing cost for every month. But some projects don't do it every month. They might do it every quarter. They might do it every other month. It doesn't matter to us. We're not going to score you on that. What you are scored on is the amount that you use. So you can see in that year, we wouldn't have done so well because we used 406 out of a total of 427. So that's what we're really concerned with. So we're looking at for the past few years. I think actually in the one you have, it might start with project year 13-14, 14-15, and 15-16. No, actually, you would have these numbers. I'm sorry. So please do use this form when you are entering the LOCS data before you submit it to us. It is very important that we get it in this information. It makes it much, much easier for us to review. Okay, I'm going to stop real quick because I think we have a question. Oh, actually, I will answer that question in a little bit, Ms. Leonard. Finally, the match and leveraging documentation. So when you go into eSnaps, I will pull up an example of the application. When you go into eSnaps, you can see that there's a section when you get closer to the budget. Sorry, I'm going through this fast. I hope it's not making you dizzy. Okay. On 7i, you have a listing for the match and a listing for the leverage that you contribute to this project. These will be populated when you finish your eSNAPS application, but they will just be populated with numbers and short descriptions of where that money is coming from. So you'll have something like United Way of Abilene, $50,000. So it'll just say something like that. And that's good, and that's what HUD needs for us to submit. But HUD also needs, and we also need, a letter that supports that entry of funding. And the letter will look something like this one that we used last year. So we state where we're getting the money from, how it's calculated, really make it clear on how we came to the number we came to. And you have that for your match and your leverage. And really, the letters are about the same. You just want to be very clear on where the money's coming from, how you got to the amount you got to. I've seen some agencies actually input a spreadsheet into their letters. So they'll copy and paste just the table that shows exactly how they came to what they are reporting for match and or leverage. One quick thing, match is your required amount. So that's what you're required by HUD to provide. Leverage is something that's above that, and they are separate amounts. We certainly encourage you to contribute as much leverage as possible because it will help your application individually, but it will also help our overall CoC. Let me go back to the agenda. We had a question from Bonnie. I struck this because it's a duplicate. E and G basically are talking about the same thing. Okay, there are some questions that are coming in, so I'll try to answer those. So Mr. Del Ferris from Spindletop, MHMR in Beaumont, asked, remind us please, what is the minimum required match percent? It really depends on what you're asking for, but for most of you, it's going to be 20%. HUD used to have these different percentages by certain line items. They made it a lot easier. Your supportive services and operations, you both need to match by 20%. Leasing, your leasing dollars, you don't match at all. Your rental assistance dollars, you do match, and it's 20%. The big difference is when you get to construction. If you're building new projects, then you're back to those higher percentages. If someone is doing that, oh, I'm sorry, it's 20. Mary did point out it's 25%. All of those numbers I just said, they're 25%. The reason I say 20%, well, I'm not going to confuse you. They're 25%. When you do the calculations, you'll see that it looks like 20, but it is 25%. Sorry for the confusion. So our supportive service and operations and rental assistance are matched 25%. So well, no, I'm not going to do that calculation for you right now. The important thing to know is in eSNAPs, when you're entering in that amount, you should figure this out before you start entering in your funding request in the eSNAPs. But when you're putting in the eSNAPs and you put in what your match funding will be, if you're under the percentage that you need to be under, then it will let you know. The system will let you know. Okay, let's see. And so, yeah, so maybe I do need to go over the calculation. So Del Ferris follows up by asking, okay, and that's 25% of the federal request and not the total. So it is, yes, that is true. So if you are asking for, let's see if I can do some really simple math here. Bear with me. Okay, say you're asking for $10. Then I'm sorry, say you're asking for $8. Yeah, okay. So if you're asking for $10, 80% of that would come from HUD. If we're talking about supportive services, 20% would come from you. So you're looking at the overall $10. If you need $10 for your project, then you know HUD's going to contribute 8. So you add 25% of that, and that gives you your 10. So that's why I always say 20%, because when you get your overall number, that's what it is. Is that clear? I do not want to confuse people. So please speak up if it's not. And okay, it's at least clear to one person. I hope it's clear to others. I will put together a spreadsheet with some explanations and send that to you. I've done that in years past, and that'll help out. Actually, we do have a match calculator. I believe HUD has a match calculator that you can use, and we'll see if we can find that and send that to you, just so you are clear. Okay, I'm going to take a little time to pause and see if you have any questions about any of the forms that are required for submission. Okay, no questions. We will move on, and this is the last part. We will get into using eSnaps. Now I will say, well, this isn't the last part, actually. There's the resources to go over after. But for those of you who have applied for this money before, you know that you have to apply for it by using eSnaps. And that's the electronic system that HUD uses for the Continuum of Care program competition. For those of you who haven't done this before, I would definitely encourage you to look at HUD's resources that Mary and Caitlin will go over in a few minutes, but look over those resources, specifically look at navigating through eSnaps. You'll see a little bit when you watch me do this, but I think going through and looking at what HUD has is a good idea too. Now, they've changed something with eSnaps recently, and they've changed some of the browser configurations. What I found just playing with it yesterday, I found that Internet Explorer 11 works well for me. Just find out what works best for you and use that. Use that announcement from HUD a few days ago that shows you how to configure your browser. In fact, we'll look for that and resend that. Okay, I'm sorry, I need to repeat something. Bonnie, can you let me know what I need to repeat? Okay, I think I've answered that question already. So yeah, find the browser that works best, works fastest for you. This seems to work the fastest, and that's all relative because they don't work that fast. Oh, I'm sorry, the version of Internet Explorer that I am using is version 11. So that seems to work the best for me. For those of you who don't have an account at all, you got to start by creating your profile. I'm not going to go into that right now. HUD has guidance on that, but if you're not even in eSnaps yet, you got to start with that, and then you have to be assigned to a project, and that's a whole nother training there, I think. Most of you, if not all of you, are in eSnaps already. Yeah, it looks like there are just a few of you who may not be. We'll see if we can find that guidance for you and send that to you if you're not even in eSnaps. And I think I might have a recording from some previous years on that. It's easy. But once you get in, then you have to know how to navigate. So I'm going to go ahead and get in under the THN account. Well, I'm going to try. eSnaps will log you off after a certain amount of time. Okay, and once I get in with Internet Explorer 11, then it's faster. I haven't found a browser that gets you into the program very quickly. So just a little eSnaps 101. when you get in, the first thing that you'll see is your applicant line. For many of you, you'll just have one line. There won't be other options in the drop-down menu. For us, we have several options. Some of these options are your agencies. Don't be surprised if you see that. That just means that your authorized representative has given access to Texas Homeless Network to your eSNAPS account. The reason they've done that is so we can help you throughout this process from our account, and it just makes it easier. And I feel like I'm much more appropriate than it would be if we were logging in under your username and password. But for most of you, you'll have one option here, or maybe two. A few of you may have three, but make sure you've chosen the right one before you carry on. So I'm going to use Sampleville Homeless Shelter. Under here, you have your profile. I'm not even going to go into this. All that is simply just showing what your account name is, and if you need to change your password, you can. If there's no reason to do it, unless you're trying to change the password for an employee who has left or something like that. From here on out, all of your work is going to be done in the workspace, and I'm going to get the highlighter. So your workspace is where you'll do all the work, and all the work will be done from applicants down through funding opportunity registrations, projects, and then finally submissions. And that is where you'll do the majority of your work. Once you get to that stage, once you have produced your application and it is in the submissions folder, that's where you'll do all your work actually. Let me erase all that. Okay, so I think, let me look at my agenda again. I just want to make sure that I'm staying on track here. Okay, so I will show you some of the ways to use eSNAPS by going through the applicant profile. So the first thing you need to do, everyone needs to do this. You need to go into your applicant profile. And remember I said you start with applicants. So start by clicking on your applicant line. Some of you have already done this. And if you have, that's great, you're ahead of the game. If you haven't already done this, go ahead and do this now. You can do this today and get this out of the way so you don't have to worry about doing it in the weeks ahead. And until you do it, you can't, or you most likely, I should say, will not be able to produce your either renewal or a new application. Okay, when this line opens, you'll see that there is a list of registrants, and if you click on that, you'll see the names. But this is where you identify those people who should be working on your grant, and this is where you would give them access. So all of these people have access. If you want to take away access for someone, you simply X them out. And if you want to add access, you add by clicking on the link. To add someone, you need to know what their username is and their email address that they associate with that username. That is 2 pieces of data that they would put into their profile when they create it. Okay, once you've checked all of that, go back to your list and use the buttons on the bottom. You can also go along the side to navigate, but I like to use the buttons on the bottom, the back to, or the next buttons. And if it has a save on the button, hit save if you want to save it. Don't hit next without hitting that save and next, because the information you just entered would not be saved. Okay, the rest of the work you're going to do, and you should do this very soon, if not today, will be in this orange folder. I should say, if you're new, you may need to create a new applicant folder, and you do that by clicking on the little piece of paper with the orange plus. But most of you are renewal, so you need to go in here. And what you're doing is you're looking to make sure everything's up to date. You can see I have the organization name, my fake tax ID, my fake DUNS, address, all that's still the same, it's still fake. but you need to make sure it's right for you. You need to make sure you have the right representative listed. So I would just click through here, click next. You're not going to mess anything up by just looking through it. And you know that because you have this note at the bottom. Another thing that you want to take note of when you're navigating through eSnaps is many of the pages have this up here, instructions. That is a tool for you to use. If you want to see detailed instructions, click Show, and it will give you detailed instructions right there on the page. And you can hide them again if you want. Okay, so just go through and click Next on each section. Make sure the data is correct. Everyone's going to have to update their data if they haven't from last year anyway, but it's a good idea to go through and identify what it is you have to update. And I can tell you, you will have to update everything under attachments. All of that. You will update that. Now, you will see when you go through this that even in eSnaps it says things that like it's not required. Like this says this form is required. You'll have some sections that say they're not required. Just be safe, update them, enter everything. It's just best to have everything up to date. And there are some things that actually do need to be submitted and updated that this system for some reason says they're not required. But HUD says we need to do it. So just go ahead and update everything. Let me erase all this. Okay, so I went through and I did this yesterday. So I updated my applicant recipient disclosure update report, and you can see that it's newly uploaded. And you can see here's the description. This, for a lot of you in your forms that you download from us, it'll just say HUD 2880, but it's this report. Once you upload it, you can see it by clicking on the magnifying glass. And while we're waiting on that, we have a question from Alina. What date should you use when you upload it? You should use the date when it was attached. Sorry, let me get to that document. Yeah, use the date when it was attached for your date. And so you can see this is filled out. The only thing I don't have that I should have is a signature. If I were a real applicant, I would have a signature there. But I'm going to send you all these forms so you have these to use as reference. Just know this is a fake agency. These are fake documents. Okay, Alina clarified her question. So on the forms, actually, the forms also need to be updated. We need you to update the actual forms as well. You'll see on this form right here that I've actually updated the date on the form as well. Now the date on the form doesn't necessarily need to be the date that is referenced for the date that was attached, but you do need to have an updated date on the form. So we do need new forms. We don't want people just uploading old forms or re-uploading old forms. Okay, I'll see if there are any other questions. I didn't think that this would produce this many questions. For this form, you do, let me open it one more time here. And I'll leave it open until the questions are finished. For this form, what you do is you report the government assistance provided. So the question was, do you add the total amount of grants for the update report or do one for each grant? I add them up, and you can use additional pages as necessary. So you could just add another, you could develop a spreadsheet that has this data and just attach it as part of your upload. So if you receive emergency solution grant funding, you would also put that in here. Okay, and then finally, the last question about this, I believe. The question is, when we're talking about new forms, how new? Could it be from a few months ago because that applicant was getting started early? Yes, that's fine. We just don't want them from last year. Okay, I'm sorry. I had someone muted. Actually, you guys are muted on your end, Caitlin and Mary. They have something to offer about the forms. Mary, you have to unmute yourself on your end. Well, while she's working that, she has something for us about forms. Until she gets that ready, I'll continue to go through this. So you would just do the same for each one of these forms. You need to update each form. And go through and just click next. As the first time you pass through this, just look at everything. Make sure you have everything. Notice what you need to update. And know again that all of the attachments will need to be updated. So get all the way to the end. And then, if you need to update it, you have to click Edit. That will allow you to go in and update everything. Now, when you're navigating through this, you can click on any of these on this side to go to them, or you can click on these to go to certain pages. So let's say that as I was going through, I noticed that, and most of you will notice that all of these documents need to be updated. But let's say that I updated everything about a month ago, except for my code of conduct. So I'll say, I know that I've already looked at this. I know that it's something that needs to be replaced. So I'm going to eliminate it. And you can see that now that is not in here. And it does say that it's not required, but this is one of those ones that is actually required. So just go ahead and get it in your mind that you're going to update every attachment. But now that this is not in here, it's not uploaded, when you go to the submission summary, you can see you could not submit this. Actually, it's saying you can. I don't know why. But it is saying you can because it's not required by the system. Any section that is required by the system, it wouldn't allow you to complete it. But please upload this. So this is one in which you would have to upload a new document. So you click on the document type, give it a name, not that, and then you upload what it is you need. And there you go. Remember to use save and back to list, or just save. Don't do back to list or it will not save it. So then you can make sure that it's uploaded. Then it's ready to go. So there we go, that's good. So that is your applicant profile, and that's some of the ways to navigate through eSnaps. And also this is a way to update your applicant profile now, because it is something that you will need to submit when you submit your project application. So once everything is submitted, everything is updated, then you can hit complete. But that's not all you need to do. Then you need to export it to PDF. And you'll go to a page like this. Just leave everything checked, export it to PDF, and give it a name. I mean, you can just leave it the same name, but it's better to give it a name, say Sampleville app profile. Make sure we know what it is. And then that's one of the things that you will send to us. Okay, we have a question that was written in. Okay, and this is something we'll need to get into more when we're talking about project applications at a later date, but the question is about match and leverage letters. So when you're looking at the dates for those, what you're doing is you're projecting out. So you're saying when we receive funding for this project and when we're operating this project, we will have this match funding to support it. So you need the letter to be a current letter, signed and dated as currently as you can before you submit your grant. But on the letter, you state that it is for the project year in which you are applying. So it's not money that you've already used, it's money that you will use. And I know that that's not always going to work out perfectly, but this is what HUD wants. They want you to project out where you're going to have that match and leverage, just like you project out what your budget will be. Okay, I have a little bit more time. I've probably taken too much time, but I have a little bit more time for the next section. If Mary and Caitlin are ready, so today I can talk about resources. Let me open up the right. Okay. So you're still muted. No, you're muted on your end. Yeah. I can't do anything. If you want to do it in here, you can. Sorry, y'all. We had some technical issues. But they are going to go over some of these resources. I'll go ahead and pull them up right now, actually. I'll go through them. I don't know, but you can see it's. So I'll just go through them. I'll go through them here. Sorry, y'all. A little confusion here. So we have some resources on our website, and you can gather those from going to thn.org. That's fine. Then go into or hover over balance of state and go down to resources. We know that's quite a few steps, but you can go through each one of these and then get to the page you need to go to. Then you click on balance of state CoC grant materials. And when you click on that, everything that we have available for you will be up here. We will put this, or at least sections of this webinar, up here as well, as we have webinars from the past. But you can see it starts with our RFP, our renewal project evaluation, and our application for new projects. Then you will be able to view some webinars there. Let's see, this is another webinar. And that's always weird to hear my own voice. But anyway, then you can see some of the other resources that we have through here. We have some of the eSNAP's features and functions. If you're new to eSNAP's, definitely go there. Some of these are uploaded from HUD's website. Looks like, yeah, well, that actually, we need to update that. But we will update that for sure. That's guidance on doing what I just showed you, updating your applicant profile. Then your applicant profile forms, everything that I just showed you, you can find here in a compressed file that's opening. You can see they're all there. And you can utilize those. We'll make sure all that's up to date. Here's a leverage sample in case you need some to look at something else. There's just some information for you when you're doing leverage. Your LOX reporting forms. A kind soul reported us that we had the old forms up before, so the new forms are up. They are the blank forms. You can utilize those, and you can start that today if you want. Then you just see some other resources that we think would be helpful as you're going through and working on your application. Then always go to HUD and look at what they have. Go to Manage Program. Then if you'll scroll down on the right-hand side, you have Homeless Assistance. My advice, just go down to where it says CoC. Click on that. We will put the direct website link up on our page as well, the page that we just reviewed. Scroll down and look for this announcement. That's where I always start. Then you can go to the eSNAPS resources page if you need help with eSNAPS. And that's probably where a lot of you will start. So for those of you who are brand new to eSNAPS, you'll start there, of course. And then here's some really just general information. The key is with this, you're filtering by your resource type, basically. So many of you will want to go in there, and you'll want to go in there. So it's either the first or fourth option for you in the eSNAPS resources. I would just get in there and navigate around and see and make sure you can find what you need to find. Then, if you are satisfied with your knowledge of eSNAPS and how to get everything set up in eSNAPS, go into your funding availability page, and you can find things like the instructional guides, which actually brought me right back to eSNAPS. You can find things like the frequently asked questions. That's good to look at from time to time. Let's see if anyone's written in anything for the project applications yet. Looks like, yes, they have. So there's a lot of things already in the FAQs. So it's a good idea to check that. That'll help you keep up to date, and it may answer your question. You may not have to wait on one of us to answer you. You may be able to find the answer there. Like I said, we'll make these links available to you, but check both our website and HUD's website, the HUD Exchange, and I think between the two you'll get the information that you need. So let me just close by saying, and I will stick around for any questions you have. Let me close by saying that we will be keeping everything up to date as possible. As soon as HUD comes out with more guidance, we'll give that guidance to you. We'll update our forms accordingly. We'll just do whatever we need to do to help you put together the best application you can. Saying that, that being said, I should say that please be patient with us. We are working with a lot more people than we have in the past, and there's a lot going on here right now, but we will get back to you. So please ask questions and use the resources we have available to guide you through this process. And one more time, I will say we do plan to hold another training that is really specific to project applications. We'll try to set that up as soon as possible and let you know about that as soon as possible. So I'm going to stop right there and ask if there are any questions. And everyone who is saying thank you, I really appreciate that. We appreciate that you are thanking us for our hard work. But do keep in mind, this is our job. So, and our job is to help you and to answer questions from you. So it's good that you're thanking us, but this is something that we need to do, and you need to hold us to that. Okay, any questions? I'm going to stick around. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.